come.
Here's the goater. Oh, they just love him so much. Watch this. There they go. They're all expecting babies. There's the little fainter. Half white, half black, faints dead when somebody scares her. Great entertainment. Ooh, they like that. A man of many talents. Goating being one of them.
That's my kids.
There you go, that's your kids. Second generation.
Oh, it's cold out here. I believe it actually went below freezing last night here in Tennessee. Woo! All right, here we are. Another question you have sent in. Let's get right to it. I attended a Bible study with some of my friends, and the teacher said that the church is spiritual Israel, that all the promises made to Israel now apply to the church. If that is true, then all the prophecies about Jews being brought back to Israel and the nation restored would be meaningless. What about the prophecies of the temple being rebuilt and the nations coming to Jerusalem to worship? They say I should take the Bible literally, that it is a spiritual book meant to draw us closer to God. What do you say? I say that I am not that smart, and so I have to rely on first-hand knowledge, first-hand opinion from God himself. So that's why I am a Bible student and have been for 60 years or a little more. And so the question is, what does the Bible say? It says a lot, and you're going to be shocked if you're of that persuasion. Now, it's not, I mean, like, 1/3 of the Bible would refute that concept of a church being spiritual Israel. Romans 11:25. Now remember, this is written well after Christ. This is the Apostle Paul writing. He said, "For I would not, brethren, that you should be ignorant of this mystery." Apparently some were. He said, "Lest you should be wise in your own conceits." So apparently some people had gotten smarty pants and were conceited, and they thought that Israel was no longer in God's program, that the church had taken its place. That blindness in part is happened to Israel until the fullness of the Gentiles be come in. So he said, yes, Israel is in a state of blindness and will be until the fullness of the Gentiles be come in. Till God is through, saved all the Gentiles he's going to save, the church is complete. And so at that point, when the fullness of the Gentiles has come in, all Israel shall be saved. As it is written, there shall come out of Zion the deliverer, and he shall turn away the ungodliness from Jacob. This is my covenant unto them, which I shall take away their sins. So at this point, Israel, when Paul is writing, was in a state of unbelief and rejection of Messiah. So some people were saying, so God's through with Israel. He said, no. Even though blindness has happened to them for a period of time, there's going to come a day when God turns away ungodliness from Jacob, and he'll make a new covenant with them. Now in the book of Revelation, written about 95 AD, last book in the New Testament to be written, at this point, Israel was persecuting the Christians very heavily, and as a nation they had completely rejected Jesus as Messiah, although tens of thousands of Jews had been converted to Christ. So John writes, I heard the number of them which were sealed, and there were sealed 144,000 of all the tribes of the children of Israel. So God gives John a vision of the future. And in that vision, he sees 12,000, verse 5, of the tribe of Judah were sealed 12,000, tribe of Reuben were sealed 12,000, tribe of Gad were sealed 12,000, and he goes through all 12 tribes. So he names each tribe a tribe of Israel. That's not the church in Texas and the church in Mississippi and the church in Florida. That's one of the tribes of Israel, 12,000 of each tribe, are sealed during the tribulation period. And they go out and preach the gospel to the whole world. And then the book of Revelation tells us about God protecting and saving the Jewish people, about judgments that fall upon Jerusalem, and then about Jesus coming back to Jerusalem and establishing his throne in Israel, in the city of Jerusalem, and David the king being resurrected, and God ruling over the nations for 1,000 years. And there are hundreds of Old Testament passages that support that. How could God be through with Israel when the Bible predicts a center place that Israel will play in the last days? Now, the Old Testament is replete with refutations of the idea of the church being spiritual Israel. Now, I'm going to take you quickly through Jeremiah chapter 30, some highlights through chapter 35. This is just five chapters out of the whole book of Jeremiah, and anywhere you turn in the book of Jeremiah would be similar to this. The word of the Lord came to Jeremiah from the Lord saying, we'll skip a little bit as I go down. He said, write these words, lo, the day will come, saith the Lord, that I will bring again the captivity of my people Israel and Judah, saith the Lord. I will cause them to return to the land that I gave their fathers, and they shall possess it. But they shall serve the Lord their God and David their king, whom I will raise up unto them. David had been dead at this point about 700 years, and yet it wouldn't be that long. He'd been dead about 300 years. And he said, I'm going to raise up David, my servant, to reign in Jerusalem. Many prophecies like that. Have you ever gone to church on Sunday and seen King David playing his harp and singing the Psalms? I don't think so. But they shall serve the Lord their God and David their king. Therefore fear thou, O servant Jacob, saith the Lord. I'm going to skip down. He said, for I am with thee, saith the Lord, to save thee, though I make a full end of all nations, whether I have scattered thee, yet will I not make a full end of thee. Here's a very distinct prophecy. God said, though I eliminate all those nations where you've been scattered, I make a full end of them, just gone. He said, I will not make a full end of thee. That means that Israel is going to be God's central focus when Germany is gone, when England is gone, when America is gone. Israel will still be prominent in God's work. I will correct thee in measure, and I'll not leave thee altogether unpunished. For I will restore health unto thee, and I will heal thee of thy wounds, saith the Lord, because they called thee an outcast. That's what the Calvinists have called Israel, an outcast that God has rejected forever and replaced Israel with the church, saying, this is Zion whom no man seeketh after. That's what God said they would say. And so many have fallen for that. The Lord hath appeared of old unto me, saying, yea, I have loved thee with an everlasting love. Therefore with loving kindness have I drawn thee. I'll bring thee forth from the north country, gather thee from the coast of the earth, and the blind, the lame, the woman with child that travaileth, and so forth, so forth, so forth. They'll come weeping. Hear the words of the Lord, O ye nations, and declare it in the isles afar off, and say, here it is, he that scattered Israel will gather him and keep him as a shepherd doth his flock. Behold, the days come, saith the Lord, that I'll make a new covenant with the house of Israel and with the house of Judah. This is not the new covenant made with the church. This is a covenant made with Israel. For this shall be the covenant that I will make with the house of Israel after those days, saith the Lord. I'll put my law in their inward parts and will write them in their hearts, and I'll be their God, and they shall be my people. Heard a Seventh-day Adventist the other day teaching this, and he was using this to support the idea that the church is still under the law because under the new covenant, the law is written in our hearts, so it's still there, and we still have to obey it, and therefore we should keep the Sabbath. And he had no idea, didn't know, that there is a new covenant with Israel that has not yet come about. And they shall teach no man, every man, they shall teach no more every man his neighbor, and every man his brother, saying, know the Lord. In other words, at that time when this takes place, when God makes this new covenant, he said at that time, there won't be an evangelist. There won't be any encouraging another person to come to know the Lord. For they shall all know me, from the least of them unto the greatest of them, saith the Lord. For I'll forgive their iniquities and remember their sin no more. Now, I've never heard of a time when there's no need for evangelism. No need to share Christ with someone else. He said in that day, that will be the condition. That's during the millennial reign of Christ, when every man will know the Lord because he appears on television every night. Not CNN, neither Fox either. 31:35, Jeremiah. Thus saith the Lord, which giveth the sun for a light by day, and the ordinance of the moon and of the stars for a light by night, which divideth the sea with the waves thereof. The Lord of hosts is his name. Now here's what God says. If those ordinances, that is the sun and the moon and the function of the earth in its cycles, if those ordinances depart from before me, saith the Lord, then the seed of Israel shall also cease from being a nation before me forever. God says, as long as there's sun and the moon and stars, days and nights, as long as that exists, there'll be a nation of Israel before me. Thus saith the Lord, if heavens above can be measured, and the foundations of the earth searched out beneath, I will also cast off all the seed of Israel for all that they've done, saith the Lord. Now Israel, people point to how Israel's sin is in a state of unbelief. God recognizes that. He says, if for that reason, if because of their rejection of me, I should cast them off, he said, then the earth would cease to rotate. The sun and the moon would cease to exist. Behold, the days come, saith the Lord, that the city shall be built. It shall not be plucked up nor thrown down any more forever. The city of Jerusalem. There will come a time when there'll never be a risk of stones being dislodged, of it being overrun, of it being bombed, or anything ill happening to the city of Jerusalem. It's going to exist, he said, forever. Now, somebody says, that's the New Jerusalem. No, the New Jerusalem is for the church. This Jerusalem is for Israel. Now, he says again, if you can break my covenant of the day, my covenant of the night, that there should not be day and night in their seasons, then may also my covenant be broken with David my servant, that he should not have a son to reign upon his throne, and with the Levites, the priests, my ministers. So he said, as I promised David, he'd sit on the throne and his seed would sit on the throne forever. I know they say that seed is Christ. He says he's going to raise up David. And we have many prophecies that speak of David and Christ reigning together. So if they're reigning together, then David can't be Christ. Christ can't be David. Two different people. As the host of heaven cannot be numbered, neither the sand of the sea measured, so will I multiply the seed of David my servant and the Levites that minister unto me. Listen, if you're a Gentile from England, you are not of the seed of David. If you are from Scotland or Ireland or Germany, you are not of the seed of David. Unless you have Jewish ancestry and can trace it back by the male lineage to David, you are not of the seed of David. No, he says, moreover, the word of the Lord came unto Jeremiah, saying, considerest thou not what this people have spoken, saying? That's what the people are saying. The two families which the Lord hath chosen, that's northern Israel and Judah, two nations, he hath cast them off. Thus they despise my people, that they should be no more a nation before them. God anticipated that people would see this divided Israel in rebellion and disobedience and say God had cast them off forever. He anticipated that, and he repeatedly in the Old Testament warned us not to fall for that false doctrine. Thus saith the Lord, if my covenant be not with day and night, and if I have not appointed the ordinance of heaven and earth, then will I cast away the seed of Jacob and David my servant, so that I will not take any of his seed to be rulers over the seed of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, for I'll cause their captivity to return and have mercy on them. Now, here's one last passage, Revelation 2:8-9. Oh, this ought to set you back. He's writing to the 7 churches of Asia that existed at 95 AD, and they're representative of churches down through the ages. In any given church age, those 7 churches, their temperament, their strengths, their weaknesses can be found in the church. He said, unto the angel of the church in Smyrna write, these things saith the first and the last, which was dead and is alive. I know thy works, and tribulation, and poverty. They were having a hard time. But thou art rich. And I know the blasphemy of them which say they are Jews and are not, but are of the synagogue of Satan. It's pretty dangerous to claim you're spiritual Israel. Pretty dangerous to claim you're the new Jew. You know, how do you make a spiritual Jew? Well, you have to start with a Jew. How do you make fried potatoes? You have to start with a potato. You can't start with a carrot and end up with fried potatoes. You can't start with a Gentile, end up with a spiritual Jew. A spiritual Jew is a saved, born-again person of the lineage of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. That makes a spiritual Jew. Otherwise, you're just a saved Gentile. So that is the answer to your question of those who teach that Bible study. It seems to be real important to a lot of people today to try to take the place of Israel. Are they unhappy with being a Christian? Why do they want to be a Jew? Why do they want to transplant the promises of God from Israel to the church? There's plenty of blessings for the church. I'll tell you one reason they do that. They want to go back to the law. They're insecure in the grace of God, and they need the law to give them identity and meaning. And so if they can claim to be spiritual Israel, then they can claim that the law still has jurisdiction over them. Read the book of Galatians. Get my tape series on Galatians and listen to that. That'll shock you. Okay, that's all for now. Got to get back out there and check on my goats, my kids.